Ladies and gentlemen, this is really cool. Our next session and the after lunch program, we've got Jayne Groll from the DevOps Institute. Jayne has been an icon, an luminary in the IT community for many years across ITSMF and the ITIL, and now very much in the modern IT Ops and DevOps communities. The CEO and founder of the DevOps Institute, let me get this right, a professional body for IT professionals, right? Something right along those lines. So Jayne's going to take us through a whole bunch of ideas around what sort of new skills do you need in this new ops environment. So if you could join me in welcoming Jayne to the stage. Jayne.
Can you hear me back there? Are we on? Yep. So I don't know that I can live up to everything that Andy just said, but I do want to talk a little bit about skills. You know, one of the reasons that we, Andy and Damon and I kind of conceived the idea of NewOps Days is that we were hearing the term NoOps. Right? Everybody hear the term NoOps? It sounds like no job, no respect, right? And right, boo. Now, the intent was a good intent, right? The intent was a really good intent to say, let's automate some of the repetitive tasks of operations. That was awesome. But we started to reframe it to NewOps. And I think that hopefully as we start to move forward with NewOps, we also look at some new skills. So a little bit about me, as Andy said, you know, I've been around IT for a long time. I was really fortunate to work for a Wall Street law firm as Unix was starting to become commercial in the late 80s. So I've had a few decades to kind of watch the evolution of IT from where we were then to where we are now, and it's really a fantastic journey. I have spent some time in the ITSM space. I'm a Scrum Master. I'm an operations person at heart. I've run NOCs, I've run service desks, I've certainly managed infrastructure teams. So it's really gratifying to kind of see where we are today. More importantly, I want to tell you just a second about the DevOps Institute. How many of you have heard about the DevOps Institute before today? Not many of you. Become members. Membership today is free. Someday it may not be. We are a community of professional DevOps. So we accredit 7 certifications that are skill-based. We have a Slack channel, we have a job board, there's a lot of content behind the membership. But most importantly, we want to be a community of communities. So if you're not familiar with us, please go to our website, join. We're really all about continuous learning. We don't do the training. We have about 140 partners in 35 countries that do, and really proud to tell you we've certified 10,000 people as of this month. So really very, very excited about the direction of that. So let's start our story here. So if we start to look at IT, we start to see that IT is a system of systems. And as I've said, I had a chance to kind of watch the evolution of IT. And the great news is each of these systems did continual improvement within their own system. The problem is the handoffs between the systems often resulted in a lot of delays. And each of these systems are kind of like the 7 kingdoms of Game of Thrones, right? They all want to sit on the Iron Throne. They all want to claim that, you know, their tools, their practices, their vocabulary is the best and is going to be what saves IT from itself. But the reality is part of the reason we are here where we are today is we have different tools and we have different vocabulary and we have different practices, and we are not a single value stream. So when we start to look at skilling for IT, we have to start looking at how do we skill the modern professional so that we are not pigeonholed into a single system or a single way of working, that we have a broad-based set of skills. Have you seen this before? T-shaped. Jason referenced T-shaped when he was talking about their evolution to site reliability engineering and platform engineering, right? We want all of you to become T-shaped. So what does that mean? Today, if you're an operations person or you're a developer or you're a QA person, you are an I, right? You're a specialist, and we groom specialists among the IT spectrum. Right? So we grew IT as a very, very siloed organization, and we groomed that in a way so that there were silos based on common specialties. Today, that's not enough. Today, you have to become a T-shaped individual, and what that means is the stem of the T is your I, right? That's your specialty. And if you look at this, you might actually have a couple of specialties as you personally evolve. Right? You could become pie-shaped or comb-shaped. That's not really important. What's important is when you start to look at the top of the T, that's where you have breadth of skills. So you need to know a lot about a lot of things. You don't have to be a specialist, right? But you have to have enough depth of knowledge to be cross-functional, to support your squad. Right? Anybody using the term squad now instead of team? Right? Right? Spotify introduced the concept of a squad, and it wasn't just a change of name. It was a change of direction, right? A military squad, right, protects each other, have a lot of cross-functional skills, and can support each other in case someone is unavailable. In the military squad, that unavailability is more unfortunate. In a IT squad, certainly we want to make sure you're there. So what your broad general knowledge is going to differentiate you as an IT professional as we cross the digital divide, right? Test-driven developers, have you been hearing that term a lot, right? Test-driven developers. SREs are a perfect example of T-shaped, right? They know how to code. They are operation professionals. They know how to test. They know how to triage. I mean, the broad base of skills that a typical SRE has is less about their individual specialty and more about the fact that they're multifunctional, right? So we want to groom IT professionals to be systems thinkers. Right? We want you to come away from your individual systems and start looking at the entire value stream. So let's talk about some new skills. I keep mentioning the value stream. Anybody hear of value stream mapping? Right? Anybody done value stream mapping as an exercise? It's a cool exercise, right? You get a bunch of people in the room with the sticky notes and a good facilitator, and you start to map your value stream, and you start to look at the delays between each of those activities, where time and quality become your key metrics. If you haven't done a value stream mapping exercise, or even just research what value stream mapping is, I absolutely encourage you to do that. But the value stream is really based on people, process, and technology, right? That's an old mantra that 1 is not enough, 2 is not enough, 3 is what you really need in order to think like a system. So we know in DevOps that culture is a really important aspect of how we grow a new paradigm within IT. We know that process-wise, there's a lot of processes. Man, in IT, we love our frameworks, right? How many of you are agile? Right? What? Well, again, good question. I said how many of you are agile. I didn't say how many of you are agile software developers, right? It's more important to be agile than to do agile, right? How many of you have done any work in ITSM or ITIL? How many of you hate change management? Come on, all of you raise your hand, right? Right? CI, CD, certainly lean. Value stream mapping is a lean practice. And then, of course, automation. IT, we're really good at automating the rest of the world and not so good at automating ourselves. And so all of these encompass some type of skill that for your T, you need to be able to start to groom and grow. Now, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you a little bit about some of the skills that are really emerging for everyone. And I'm going to give you a clue. I'm not a coder. Who's not a coder? Come on. Who's not a coder? I'm not a coder, right? I need to be a coder. Everybody needs to be a coder today, right? Regardless of your role. Infrastructure is code. Security is code, right? Everything as code. So if you're not a coder, you need to be a coder. How many of you are testers? Oh, guess what your homework is? Right? You all need to be testers because infrastructure is code and security is code and everything is code needs to be tested. Developers need to learn how to test from the first line of code. So that's your first 2 clues. If you're not a coder and you're not a tester, those are skills that you need to start building your own portfolio on. Cultural skills. Now, cultural skills, soft skills is something that in IT, depending on what kind of opportunities you've had, you may or may not have had a mentor, you may or may not have had some formal training in soft skills, but soft skills are really important because if we're going to collaborate better, we're going to communicate better, then you need to be able to know how to do that. How many of you have heard of Westrum? Anybody heard of Westrum? The corner in the back here, right? So Westrum talks about the flow of information and how that really affects the cultural paradigm that's your organization, right? The first level is pathological. Doesn't that sound sick, right? In a pathological environment, messengers are shot, right? In a generative environment, which is the other end of the spectrum, messengers are welcomed. right? The organization is high performing. The organization is really collaborating well, and they're sharing information not because they have to, because they want to, right? So again, really nice articles about Westrum. Go online, look up Westrum, look at the characteristics of pathological, bureaucratic, or generative organizations, and you decide who you want to be. Regardless of what your role is, you get to decide how you want to influence your organization. And these are great skills, not only for your role today, but for your role tomorrow. And I'm assuming most of you have a role tomorrow that you would like to aspire to, right? I mentioned about squads, tribes, guilds, and chapters. This is really an interesting dynamic that we're starting to see. There's an insurance company out of the Netherlands that reorganized the entire business into squads. So that cross-functionality, that ability to act fast, and their squads include business leaders, include site reliability engineers. They don't even have a service desk, right? Everyone belongs to a squad, marketing people. So again, that may be a little bit extreme, but starting to look at squad models where we don't only have agile scrum teams, and we don't only have QA teams, we really eliminate a lot of those handoffs as well. I really love that quote. You can't change culture, right? Culture doesn't transform, people transform. And they only transform when they're inspired to do that. And that is transformational leadership. Don't wait for your senior managers to give you leadership skills, right? Start looking at, anybody ever read the State of DevOps report? Comes out every year, right? The Accelerate report recently came out. I know that Puppet and Splunk worked together on a State of DevOps report. Every one of them validate that transformational leadership is an important skill for everyone in every role, because a transformational leader is an inspired leader, right? You will follow somebody that inspires you. And so regardless, again, of where you sit in the hierarchy, you have the ability to inspire other people, and therefore become a transformational leader. Continuous everything, right? It's getting a little absurd out there. So we have continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment. I like to think of SRE as continuous operations. You can, give that one to me. I don't think that it's necessarily gone viral, but we need to be continuous. And so in order to be continuous, automation will help, but it's not enough, right? It's people that have a continuous mentality, people that are continuous learners, that will take you to the next level, right? And that's something that I think when I think about SRE in particular, I've gone to SRECon a couple of years in a row. The best SREs, and I wish Michael were here to validate that, I'm sure Brian would as well, are the ones that are growing their skills constantly, right? They're asking questions, they're shadowing, they're moving themselves forward so that they can be continuous learners. If you look at these skills, though, from a hard skill perspective, as I said, if you're not a tester today, you need to be a tester tomorrow. And I don't really care what role you're in, right? Everybody has to either write test cases, read test logs, be able to think like a tester, because the only way to go fast is to be able to have pervasive testing, hopefully continuous and automated testing throughout the process. Brian mentioned before that the SREs actually aren't involved in deployment. I was like, what? Right? It's because it's being tested all along the way, right, Brian? I mean, it's being tested all along the pipeline. Now, that didn't happen magically, though at Disney maybe, right? But it didn't happen magically. It's because every human that was involved in building and authoring those tools understood the value of testing, right? It wasn't abdicated to a test team any longer. So we start to look at all of these practices. You need to know just enough. How much is just enough is something for your role, but the future of operations, I think, really depends on engineering as a practice in operational sense, and it also depends on our ability to avoid some of the handoffs we've seen in the past. Microservices and containers, for me personally, I think when I look at from a technical perspective, some of the innovations that have occurred over the last years, how many of you are working in a container environment? A few of you, right? Microservices starting to decouple your applications, some of you, a little bit, right? That makes things easier, right? Because the day of the 18-month deployment or the 2-year deployment, my husband's an accountant. They just finished a 2-year upgrade of their accounting system for his organization. And that was just to move to the next version. What do you think happened over those 2 years? Right? And I don't even want to tell you he doesn't own the company. He's manages the budget and accounting department. But can you imagine? They're still doing that out there. They're still doing millions of dollars on 2-year implementations, during which time the clock didn't stop. So considering learning about microservices, if you're not in that environment today, learn about it. Right? Learn about it. Understand what it means to decouple these monolithic applications. Understand Kubernetes. Understand Docker. Understand how we're actually able to break some of this down. And then SRE. I'm particularly fascinated by SRE, truthfully. I've been to SRECon a couple of years in a row. For me, it's the crossroads. It's the crossroads of operations. I keep saying not magic, but for you guys, that's hard for me to say in this presentation. But it's not magic, right? It's not magic. But we are all engineers. I saw somebody that spoke recently, and that was the theme. We are all engineers. And so if we take an engineering mentality to operations, then NewOps is no way, right? It's no way. Site reliability engineering, you may not be Google. That's okay. I saw somebody from Starbucks. I think Josh was there, right? We saw the woman from Starbucks, and SRE stood for Starbucks Reliability Engineering. That was cool, right? Now there's customer reliability engineering, network reliability engineering. It doesn't matter, but this is the future of operations. And if you're not an SRE today, 5 years from now, if you're in operations, I bet you are. I bet you are. So start grooming the skills that you need in order to be a site reliability engineer. The cool part also, it's a real job, right? It's a real job. So it's not an expert, a guru, a master, pick any of the other ambiguous. It's a real job. And organizations are hiring for this real job. And there's a set of practices. I love it because it integrates everything I know about IT service management, right? Is it really continuous operations? I don't know. I'm interested in that discussion, right? Is that where the continuum? I used to scream about DevOps because DevOps would end a deployment. And I wanted to stand on the mountain and scream, and now what? Right? Like, we deployed, that's awesome. What's happening for our customers? Where's the value being delivered? What about operationally? How do we support it? SRE really is bringing some interesting practices there. You could read the Google book for free online. You could buy it from Amazon. Again, you may not be Google, but there's some very, very fascinating practices that are built into that. Error budgets, toil. I mean, there's so much that you could start applying today to your organization, again, even in small little experiments. So Agile Service Management, shamelessly, I will tell you, I am the author of the Agile Service Management Guide. And it's because looking at process, that's why I ask you why you all hate change management, right? Because change management in many cases was built to be a one-size-fits-all. So again, if you're interested in getting a copy of the guide, you can download it from the DevOps Institute. But the theme here is you need to figure out how much is just enough process, depending on the circumstance, right? So it isn't a one-size-fits-all. It is not replacing ITIL or any of the other frameworks. It's really about how do we identify minimum viable process and just enough, and really create a hierarchy of how we do service management processes. They're still necessary, right? Nothing here is irrelevant. And then finally, DevSecOps, right? Anybody security? Okay, so we won't really talk too much about the security guys because there's only a few. Security is everyone's job, but that is part of the mantra of DevSecOps, that security is now part of everybody's job. It is security as code. It needs to be embedded into everything we do, and it can't just be a handoff to some security team down the pipeline, right? So again, a lot of automation, certainly moving security earlier, but I think as importantly in today's very risk-adverse world and hacker-active world, we need to make sure that we can transform the organization. This is trending as much as site reliability engineering. That's what I'm saying, is that if you're security or interested in security, this is a set of practices to really look at. And of course, tools, right? I mean, of course, tools. And, there's no shortage. Obviously, some really great tools here. My co-sponsors, Splunk and Rundeck, of course. But again, you might see reference to these. And this is just a small sampling. I mean, if you've ever seen the periodic chart of DevOps tools, it's a little mind-blowing. Learn the best practices. How many of you have read the Phoenix Project? Jayne would be really happy. But the truth is the Phoenix Project gives you an opportunity to kind of, in a very safe way, start to learn about DevOps practices. Use it as a book club, right? Learn ITIL, learn Lean, read the handbook, read Jez's continuous delivery book. Groom your skills, right? Learn. Just be a continuous learner. And I think that's, if I leave you with anything, that's what I hope you take away from this. I can't tell you exactly what to learn. I could tell you to learn to code. I could tell you to learn to test. DevOps is not a single body of knowledge, right? The idle space, I was joking. I said you have to sing a hymn before you open up the books because it became a little religious. That's not the case here, right? This is part of the continuous body of knowledge, right? The fact that you're sitting here today is part of the continuous body of knowledge. So take advantage of it. A lot of it is readily available to you. A lot of it is free. You are the only one that can master your own craft. But certainly there's a lot of available knowledge to you. If you are interested in certification, again, I'm not going to talk too much about it. Come see me at the table. DevOps Institute has accredited 7 certifications that are skill-based. Happy to tell you a little bit more about that. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you. Please join our continuous learning community.
Thank you, Jayne. Hello? Is this one on? Yeah, thank you, Jayne. I got time for one question. Does anybody have a question for Jayne? If not, I'm going to ask a question.
Here we go.
Got one? Okay. Here's our one question.
Hey, just like Palo Alto Networks has their cybersecurity canon, do you have a canon for the various books that you recommend?
Have a
canon. A body of work.
Oh,
A library, a collection of...
Yeah, so thank you for that, sorry. So we don't advocate a single document, a single body of knowledge. DevOps Institute, because we curate, we are very supportive of a collective body of knowledge. So certainly some of the books that I put up there, conferences like this, DevOps Enterprise Summit, Phoenix Project, DevOps Handbook, a new book coming out, Product to Project. If you're going to be a continuous learner, one of the things I've seen, truthfully, is that we get so embedded in a single body of knowledge. And by the way, I'll use ITIL as an example. ITIL hasn't been updated in 8 years, right? So the hymn that you're singing is 8 years old, right? It's about to be updated, that's great, but it'll probably be another 8 years. So I don't really like to get invested in a single. Let's be open to learning wherever it's available. Okay, well, thank you. I know we have some really great lightning talks coming up.
First, we have Andy, though.
We have,
Other people first,
Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Andy?
Okay, but wait, you have to help me down.